Imagine being a lone rancher, trapped in a storm seeking shelter, and finding not just safety, but two mysterious Apache sisters who would change your life forever. This is a story of courage, trust, and a night that transformed a man's destiny forever. Stay with us as we dive into this unforgettable tale, and if you love Wild West stories that touch the heart, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell, and drop a comment to share your thoughts. Let's ride into the story and see what unfolded that fateful night. The sun was sinking low over the endless plains, casting long shadows across the dusty trails. Samuel Hayes rode alone, the rhythmic clop of his horse's hooves the only sound accompanying him. He had spent most of his life tending to his cattle, living a life of solitude that offered stability but little excitement. Each day was predictable, marked by hard work, sweat, and the occasional glance at the horizon, dreaming of something more. Despite his solitude, Samuel's heart carried an unspoken longing, a desire for connection, for warmth, for a presence that could break the monotony of his lonely existence. The weather had been deceptively calm all day, but as the sun dipped below the distant hills, dark clouds rolled in with surprising speed. Thunder rumbled across the sky, a deep, resonant warning of the storm that was to come. Rain began to fall, first in soft droplets, then in a relentless torrent that soaked Samuel to the bone. His horse whinnied nervously, seeking shelter, and Samuel's instincts kicked in. Up ahead, through the sheets of rain, a small wooden cabin appeared, barely visible, tucked beneath a cluster of trees. He urged his horse forward, relief washing over him at the thought of shelter from the storm. Inside the cabin, the air was damp but dry compared to the storm outside. Samuel's eyes adjusted to the dim light, revealing a modest space with a small fireplace and worn furniture. It was far from luxurious, but it offered safety and warmth. As he set his wet gear aside, a voice whispered from the shadows, soft and melodic, yet filled with caution. Samuel froze, uncertainty gripping him. He hadn't expected company, especially not in such a remote place. From the corner of the cabin emerged two young Apache women, their expressions a mix of wariness and curiosity, watching him with guarded eyes. Samuel raised his hands in a gesture of peace, trying to communicate that he meant no harm. His voice trembled slightly as he explained that the storm had forced him to seek refuge. The sisters exchanged whispers in a language he could not understand, their glances measured, assessing him silently. Though the words were foreign, the intent was clear. They were deciding whether he could be trusted. After a tense moment, the taller sister nodded and motioned for him to sit by the fireplace. Samuel obeyed cautiously, grateful yet aware of the delicate balance of trust in that small, shadowed room. The sisters moved with quiet precision, tending to a small fire and preparing a simple meal from their meager supplies. Samuel watched, captivated by their grace, but careful not to intrude. He had never been in the presence of women like these, strong, independent, yet nurturing in their actions. The smaller sister set a bowl of warm broth before him, a gesture that spoke more than words ever could. Samuel accepted it with gratitude, sensing a connection forming despite the barriers of language and culture. In that moment, the storm outside felt distant, and the three of them existed in a fragile bubble of shared humanity. Time passed slowly, measured by the flickering of the fire and the steady rhythm of the rain. Samuel found himself opening up, recounting tales of his ranch, of the endless labor and solitude, and of the small joys that punctuated his otherwise quiet life. The sisters listened intently, their expressions unreadable yet attentive. Though he could not understand their words, their nods and gestures conveyed empathy, a silent acknowledgement of his struggles and triumphs. Samuel felt a stirring of emotions he had long buried, a mixture of relief, admiration, and something deeper that he had never dared to name. Night fell fully, thick and unyielding, yet the cabin remained a haven from the tempest outside. Samuel sat closer to the fire, the warmth seeping into his soaked clothes and chilled bones. The taller sister approached him cautiously, offering another gesture of care, a blanket to cover his shoulders. He accepted it, his heart unexpectedly lightened by her kindness. The smaller sister moved quietly, attending to the fire, her presence a calming rhythm in the dimly lit room. Samuel realized that in all his years, he had never known such simple acts of generosity to feel so profound, so transformative. Hours slipped by, marked only by the storm's diminishing roar and the occasional creak of the cabin's wooden frame. Samuel, usually solitary and reserved, found himself watching the sisters with growing admiration. Their courage, their quiet strength, and the way they navigated their world with care and precision left a mark on him. He had entered the cabin seeking shelter from a storm, but what he found was a glimpse into a world that was foreign yet irresistibly compelling. The firelight danced across their faces, illuminating expressions of resilience, intelligence, and subtle warmth that he had never encountered before. Eventually, the taller sister indicated that he should rest, pointing to a makeshift sleeping area near the fire. Samuel hesitated, mindful of propriety, but saw sincerity in her eyes and understood that she meant no harm. Carefully, he settled onto the small bedroll, wrapping the blanket around him. He lay there, listening to the sisters move quietly about the cabin, their whispered words and soft gestures a lullaby in a language he did not know but somehow felt. That night, Samuel experienced a profound awakening, not of romance alone, but of trust, understanding, and the power of human connection in the midst of uncertainty. The storm eventually subsided, replaced by a soft drizzle and the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees. Samuel, lying awake, reflected on the events of the night. He had come to the cabin seeking safety, expecting only temporary refuge from nature's fury, yet he had encountered something far more significant: the courage and grace of two remarkable women who had welcomed a stranger into their space without hesitation. Their presence had illuminated parts of him that he had long ignored: the longing for companionship, the capacity for empathy, and the ability to feel profoundly connected to others despite differences in culture and experience. As the first light of dawn filtered through the cabin's windows, Samuel rose carefully, prepared to leave yet reluctant to break the fragile bond that had formed. The sisters greeted him quietly, with soft smiles and a silent acknowledgement of the night that had passed. It was a night that would remain with him forever, shaping his thoughts, his actions, and his very perspective on life. Samuel left the cabin that morning not just with memories, but with a sense of renewal, a recognition of the transformative power of trust, and the knowledge that the simplest acts of kindness could alter the course of a man's life in ways he could never have anticipated. Days passed after that stormy night, yet Samuel Hayes could not shake the memory of the sisters. Their quiet strength, their graceful movements, and the way they had shown him kindness lingered in his mind. The solitude of the ranch no longer felt comforting. Instead, it reminded him of the warmth and connection he had briefly experienced. Samuel found himself riding back toward the cabin whenever his work allowed, compelled not by mere curiosity, but by an inexplicable pull of gratitude, respect, and something deeper he struggled to define. Each journey strengthened a bond that had begun in silence. When he arrived at the cabin, the sisters were always there, their faces brightening at his presence, though words remained limited. Samuel had started to learn fragments of their language, and they had learned a little of his, allowing a quiet exchange of understanding. Slowly, stories began to pass between them, tales of the land, of their families, of struggles and joys they had endured. Samuel realized that despite the barriers of culture and experience, they shared the same desires: security, respect, and the simple need to be seen and understood by another soul. The seasons began to change, and the vast plains transformed with the shift from autumn to winter. Samuel worked tirelessly, often with thoughts of the sisters fueling his determination. Occasionally, he would bring supplies from the town, gifts of food or warm blankets, gestures that were met with gratitude and shy smiles. Over time, trust grew between them, solid and unspoken. Samuel learned their routines, their habits, and the small joys that filled their lives despite hardship. And in return, the sisters saw beyond his rugged exterior, recognizing a gentle heart beneath the roughened hands of a man who had known loneliness too well. One evening, after the sun had dipped behind the hills, Samuel found the sisters waiting near the fire. The air was crisp with the first whispers of winter, and the firelight danced across their faces, casting shadows that made their features even more striking. Samuel sensed that this meeting was different from the others. The taller sister approached him slowly, her eyes meeting his with a directness that startled him. In her gaze, he saw not only trust, but a challenge, a call for him to open his heart fully, to acknowledge feelings he had kept buried for far too long. As the night deepened, words became less necessary. Gestures, glances, and the gentle sharing of space conveyed emotions more profound than any language could express. Samuel, who had spent years guarding his heart, felt it soften under the warmth of their presence. The smaller sister, sitting quietly nearby, offered reassurance through her calm demeanor, her mere presence a reminder that connection need not always be spoken. That night, Samuel understood the power of intimacy, not in fleeting passion, but in trust, vulnerability, and shared humanity that transcended the boundaries of culture and circumstance. The bond they had forged was not without its challenges. Samuel had to navigate the expectations of his own world while respecting the traditions and privacy of the sisters. He learned patience, humility, and the importance of listening. In turn, the sisters showed him resilience, courage, and a quiet pride that demanded respect. Through laughter, small arguments, and moments of shared labor, the three formed an unlikely family, one built on mutual reliance and the recognition that together they could face the hardships of the wilderness more easily than alone. As winter deepened, Samuel realized he could no longer return to his old life unchanged. The ranch, once his entire world, now seemed smaller, constrained. His heart had expanded to include these women, and the prospect of separation became unbearable. He made the difficult decision to integrate his life with theirs, to create a home where all three could live with dignity, warmth, and companionship. The sisters, too, accepted this path, recognizing that their bond with Samuel was not fleeting, but rooted in trust, respect, and deep affection that had grown steadily over the months. Together, they transformed the cabin and its surroundings. Samuel worked on repairs, expanded the space, and prepared the land to endure the harsh winter months. The sisters taught him skills he had never possessed, tracking, foraging, and subtle lessons in reading the land in ways he had never considered. Their influence reshaped him, instilling a quiet confidence and deeper awareness of the world around him. Nights were spent by the fire, sharing stories, preparing meals, and laughing at small jokes, a domesticity Samuel had never imagined he could experience. Through their shared life, Samuel discovered more about himself than he had in decades alone. He learned to value patience, to embrace tenderness, and to find beauty in the simplest moments. The sound of laughter, the warmth of a shared blanket, the quiet understanding in a glance. He realized that his previous life, though comfortable, had been incomplete. The storm that had driven him to the cabin had been the catalyst, but it was the courage, kindness, and wisdom of the sisters that had truly transformed him. The night that once seemed ordinary became the foundation of a lifetime of growth, intimacy, and fulfillment. When spring arrived, the land came alive with green shoots and renewed life. Samuel, once a man defined by isolation, had become part of a living, breathing family. Together, they faced challenges, unexpected illnesses, harsh weather, and the ever-present difficulties of frontier life, but always with a sense of unity and shared purpose. Samuel knew he would never forget that first stormy night, nor the way two brave sisters had changed the course of his life forever. It was a testament to the enduring power of trust, compassion, and the extraordinary ways that human connection can transform even the most solitary of souls. Years later, Samuel would look back on that night with awe. He often recounted the story to neighbors or travelers, though carefully omitting personal details. He spoke instead of the lessons learned, that courage is not just in battle, but in opening one's heart, that love can appear in the most unexpected forms, and that a single night of trust and generosity can ripple through a lifetime, reshaping everything it touches. The Apache sisters had not only saved him from the storm, they had awakened a part of him that had long been dormant, and in doing so, had forever altered the trajectory of his life.